guys, and welcome to part 2 of the Ancient Origins set review. Now, on my last video I had left off at the Mega Tyranitar EX. I actually realized that I accidentally skipped over the Regirock, which I feel like is a Pokemon that is absolutely worth discussing. It has 2 attacks, Rock Throw, not all that impressive. Indomitable Rock, however, is pretty impressive. Can hit up to 120 damage to an opponent's Pokemon if it happens to be an EX Pokemon. If that's not the case, then it's only going to hit for 60 damage. However, we do have to keep in mind that with all of the fighting energies, fighting stadiums, and just all of the support that fighting Pokemon have, this Regirock can actually be incredibly powerful. It feels like all of the Regirocks, Regice, and the Registeel were made specifically for giving EX Pokemon a very difficult time, and I think that's actually pretty cool. I actually am quite a big fan of the Regirock, Regice, and Registeel, so that's just something fantastic to hear with this upcoming set. So Regirock, definitely a Pokemon to watch out for. I feel like it is going to be a tech that certain players are going to be running to combat EX Pokemon. However, the one thing that I do want to point out is that Regirock, I feel like it's unfortunately weaker than the Hawlucha for the most part, so I feel like players would prefer to use Hawlucha as opposed to the Regirock, but Regirock definitely does have its own perks as well, in that, for example, it has a bulky 120 HP, so I don't know, maybe we'll see a little bit of a shift from Hawlucha towards Regirock. Maybe things are just going to stay the same, but just an interesting Pokemon for us to point out. Now, moving on to the next Pokemon that I feel needs a bit of discussing. It's actually a bit of a unique Pokemon. Again, for some reason we have 4 copies of it. It is the Malamar. Now, what's really unique about the Malamar is that it has 2 attacks, Entwine and Control, not exactly the greatest. What it does is that it forces the opponent to switch their active Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon, and their new active Pokemon is going to be confused. Not really an attack that I think we're going to be making use of. The other attack, though, it has the Trash Tentacle attack, which hits for 30 damage, and it allows us to search our discard pile for any one card, show it to our opponent, and then put it into our hand. Now, that can open up a lot of possibilities. I mean, there was a Sableye that had a relatively similar attack to that had been rotated out, so I think we're going to be seeing Malamar as a very sort of disruptive Pokemon. People are probably going to be trying to recycle hammers using the Trash Tentacle attack and things like that. I mean, Malamar would absolutely work fantastically in the expanded format. In the standard format, though, it will be losing a lot of disruptive cards such as the Hypnotoxic Lasers, Verbank City Gym, and things like that, so I don't think it's going to be as powerful, but I still think there is some potential for it. Definitely a Pokemon worth pointing out. So yeah, so Malamar, just another very cool Pokemon. I do think it's going to open up some possibilities. Now, moving on to our next Pokemon, guys, we're going to be taking a look at 2 different types of Metagross. The first one is the Metagross that does not happen to be of the half art variety. It has the Magnet Warp ability. So what it does is that once during our turn, we may switch our active Pokemon with one of our bench Pokemon, and then the opponent is forced to switch their own active Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon. This may just become the new Caldeo EX replacement, I think. I mean, I'm not really sure. I mean, there's certainly some decks that could work quite well, especially metal decks, since they are going to be losing that Caldeo EX support. So I feel like Magnet Warp can potentially fill that gap, but it is a stage 2 Pokemon. I'm not really sure how feasible it's going to be in metal decks, especially if they're running a lot of Bronzors and Bronzongs, because those are already evolution Pokemon themselves. So not really sure if the space will permit us to run them, but still a Pokemon worth pointing out. It also has one attack, which is the Iron Cannon attack. Can hit for a massive 160 damage. So it hits for an initial 80 damage. If we decide to discard all metal energy cards attached to the Metagross, we are able to hit for 160 damage. So that is kind of cool. Again, I'm not really sure how much use this card is going to see, but I do think it's going to be used as a tech card in certain types of decks. Moving on to the second different type of Metagross. This is the half-art version. Again, it has the Theta Double ability, which allows this Pokemon to have up to 2 Pokemon tool cards attached to it. The first attack that it has is the Machine Gun Stamp attack. which is entirely dependent on the number of cards that we have in our hand. If we have 6 cards in our hand, for example, it will hit for an initial 20 damage plus 10 more damage for each card in our hand, so that is potentially up to 80 damage. This can actually be a very solid attack, I think. I mean, again, it's very energetically efficient, and if we can attach 2 silver bangles or 2 muscle bands, then this Metagross can actually dish out a whole lot of damage. So I think that the Machine Gun Stamp attack is definitely one that we should look out for. It also has another attack, the Guard Press attack. I'm not really impressed by this attack. It hits for 80 damage, just very, very energetically expensive, and all it does is that it reduces our opponent's next attack by 20 damage. I mean, maybe some players are going to try and take advantage of this attack, and the two tool type cards that they will be attaching to the Metagross are probably going to be two Hard Charms. I don't know, maybe players will be going towards that type of route, but I can see some potential for Machine Gun Stamp. Guard Press, unfortunately, I don't really think it's the greatest attack. Now, moving on to the last of the Regi brothers, we are taking a look at the Registeel again. It has an attack that specifically targets EX Pokemon. The Imprisoning Hammer attack hits for 70 damage. If our opponent's active Pokemon happens to be an EX, we are able to immediately discard an energy card attached to it. So again, just a very specific with respects to targeting those EX Pokemon. It also has the Iron Head attack, which hits for 30 damage. 30 damage times the number of heads we are able to flip in a row. As soon as we flip a Tails, that's it. That's going to cut our attack short. Could work well with the Victini, that allows us to reflip, possibly even the Flip Coin. But, Flip Coin? Don't think I'm pronouncing that card correctly. The little tool attachment that allows us to reflip our coins. Anyways, I don't think the Iron Head attack is really going to be used. Imprisoning Hammer, on the other hand, I could see it being used just to try and disrupt the energy flow to our opponent's EX Pokemon. Alright, so moving on, guys, we then have the Gardevoir, a very, very similar ability to that which the Serperior possessed, as opposed to the Serperior, which automatically healed 10 damage from our Pokemon in between turns, which of course adds up to a total of 20 damage. Gardevoir specifically heals 20 damage from each of our Pokemon, but we have the option of doing so. So that's actually kind of nice, because if we are running Outrage Pokemon, for example, which are more powerful with more damage counters stacked against them, then it may be better for us to hold off on using the Bright Heal ability. So I do like the fact that we are given a choice with respects to the Bright Heal ability. Gardevoir also has the Telekinesis attack. What's kind of cool about it is that it requires 3 energy cards of any type, so that's kind of cool. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Gardevoir is restricted specifically to Fairy type decks. So Telekinesis does allow us to choose one of our opponent's Pokemon and do 50 damage to it. It's actually kind of a terrible attack, though. I mean, 50 damage is not a strong amount by any means. Maybe we could see some sort of attack with a Bat line along with it, but I don't really see that as being all that likely. Anyways, Gardevoir is a pretty cool Pokemon. I definitely think we are going to be seeing it in certain types of decks. Now, moving on, guys, we have the Whimsicott, which I actually think is a very, very, very cool Pokemon. It has the Wind Mischief and the Tumbling Tackle attack. Wind Mischief is an incredible attack in my opinion, especially if it's paired off with the Wailord EX. So what it does, we can do is choose one of our bench Pokemon and then move all damage counters on that Pokemon to one of the opponent's active Pokemon. I had taken a look at a very, very similar sort of deck strategy, as some of you guys may recall. It was involving the Demadrigus and the Wailord EX. Again, I'm still not sure to this point whether or not I'm actually pronouncing the attack or even Kofadrigus correctly, but anyways, Whimsicott's a very cool Pokemon, especially if it's paired off with Pokemon such as the Wailord EX. I absolutely do think that I'm going to be taking a look at the Whimsicott in one of my future videos. Moving on, we have one of the most hyped cards of the Ancient Origin set. It is the Giratina EX. Very, very solid ability and a potentially even more impressive attack. So the Rebellious Wave ability prevents all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon by our opponent's Mega Evolved Pokemon. Now that is deadly, because we're seeing a lot of Mega Evolution Pokemon now just becoming incredibly popular. So for example, we've seen a lot of Primal Kyogre EXs, we've seen a lot of Primal Groudon EXs. we're seeing a lot of Mega Rayquaza EX, Mega Manectric EX. A lot of these decks tend to be performing very, very well as well. And Giratina EX seems to just single-handedly shut down those types of decks. Now, Giratina EX could potentially be countered by cards such as the Silent Lab. However, Giratina EX is not going to go down without a fight. It has the Chaos Veil attack, which hits for 100 damage. And during our opponent's next turn, they're unable to play any Pokemon Tool cards, any special energies, or any stadium cards from their hand. So this is specifically aimed at preventing the opponent from being able to lay down that Silent Lab. So that is very deadly. And of course, those Pokemon Tool cards. So for example, if the opponent happened to have a Garbodor and they wanted to shut down our Giratina EX's special ability in that type of manner, well, unfortunately, you can't do that if I have already attacked you with the Chaos Veil attack. Same with special energies. A lot of decks run special energy cards. So that Giratina EX is just an incredibly cool Pokemon. Very hyped about. I think it's gonna reach some pretty ludicrous pricings as well. Possibly not as expensive as the Shaman EX upon the new set release, but I still think this is a card that is going to go for quite a bit. So moving on, guys, we have the Gudra. No, not really a Pokemon we're discussing. None of these Pokemon are really all that great. I do want to briefly discuss the Porygon Zs. I actually think that there's a little mistake with respect to the translation over here. So immediately I want to point you guys to the Slow Beam attack. As you guys can see here, it says it only requires 2 colorless energies, but here it requires 3 colorless energies. So I'm almost positive that there's 3 colorless energies and the person translating just made a small mistake. Anyways, we have the Slow Beam attack, which hits for 70 damage, and during the opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon's attacks cost an additional colorless energy card for them to be able to attack. So kind of a cool attack. I mean, 130 HP. It is a stage 2 Pokemon. Not exactly all that great. Now, the attack that I'm really impressed with, and it can just open up a world of possibilities, is the Cyber Crash attack. This discards all special energy cards attached to all of our opponent's Pokemon. I mean, that is an absolutely insane attack. If our opponent focuses on running a whole ton of special energy cards in their deck, Cyber Crash is absolutely devastating. So I don't know, maybe we'll see Porygon Z, especially if we see a dramatic rise in the number of decks running special energy cards. So it just felt like it was a Pokemon worth pointing out, especially with the little mistake and the translation that I found. Anyways, the next Pokemon that we have, guys, is the Half Art Porygon Z. For some reason, the card was cut off and we can't exactly see it completely, but you can rest assured that it has the fighting weakness. Anyways, it has the Theta Stop ability, preventing all effects done to this Pokemon by our opponent's Pokemon's abilities. Generally speaking, I'm not exactly all that impressed by this Pokemon. It has the digital reboot, which allows us to choose any number of evolved Pokemon on our bench and then remove as many of those evolution cards from those Pokemon and then put them into our hand. Now, that's actually a bit of a cool attack, especially if used with the right evolution Pokemon. So for example, I feel like this Porygon Z can work quite well with the new Mega EX Pokemon that we're going to be seeing. You guys, I'm going to be discussing it shortly, but what it is that as soon as you evolve them from their non-Mega EX form, so for example, if you evolve the Groudon EX into the Primal Groudon EX, and of course we had made use of the digital reboot, through evolving our Pokemon, then we're able to remove all damage counters on them. So that's actually kind of cool. It can also be used in decks that run Pokemon such as the Bat Lines and things like that. So that's actually a pretty cool attack. Not really sure how useful it's going to be, but definitely something to keep in mind. We also have the Screen Resolution, which hits for 50 damage and simultaneously confuses our opponent's active Pokemon. Now, it is a stage 2 Pokemon. I think a lot of players would probably stray away from using the Screen Resolution, and instead they would probably be using that digital reboot as sort of a tech to a lot of their decks, especially again if they're running those bats or those special Mega Evolution Pokemon that I will be discussing. I believe they're towards the end of the set review, so I'm definitely going to get around to those. But yeah, so that is the Porygon Z. Now we have the Lugia EX, very similar to the Mewtwo EX. Its Aero Ball attack hits for 20 damage times the number of energy cards attached to this Pokemon and the defending Pokemon. So that is exactly the same thing as the X-Ball attack that the Mewtwo EX possessed. It also has 170 HP. It is of a different type than the Mewtwo EX, which is actually a positive thing because the Lugia EX can be paired up with the Altaria, and that will remove the lightning weakness that the Lugia EX has. So that is kind of cool. It also has the Deep Hurricane attack, which I would say is better than the Side Drive attack that the Mewtwo EX had. That Side Drive attack required 2 Psychic Energies and 1 Colorless Energy, hit for 120 damage. Deep Hurricane, on the other hand, requires 4 Colorless Energies, so that's kind of nice. I mean, we could potentially get it going for 2 energy attachments, hits for an initial 80 damage and an additional 70 more damage if there happens to be a Stadium card at play, and we also get to send that Stadium card in the discard pile. So Lugia EX is definitely a very cool Pokemon. I can definitely see it being used in a lot of decks just because it's highly flexible. It is a colorless Pokemon, so there definitely are advantages to running Lugia EX in a lot of decks. Now we finally hit the trainer cards, so I'm going to be going through every single one of these cards. So first of all, let's go and start off with the Eco Arm trainer card. So this allows us to shuffle 3 Pokemon Tool cards from our discard pile back into our deck. Now, of course, this is meant to be used in combination with all of the unique Pokemon that we are seeing coming out with this set. As you guys can see, there's a lot of them with the Theta Double ability, which allows us to attach up to 2 Pokemon Tool cards to any of those Pokemon. So I definitely do think we're going to be seeing the Eco Arm in a lot of decks, and we're seeing it pulling out a little hard charm over here. Going on to the next card, we have the Paint Roller, a very unique sort of card. It allows us to discard a Stadium card in play, then we are able to draw a card. Not really sure how I feel about this card. I mean, I can definitely see it coming in handy, especially if we are facing a Giratina EX, because Giratina EX is, of course, going to prevent us from laying down our own Stadium cards, for example. And if our opponent's Stadium card is just so detrimental to us to the point where we really need to discard it, Paint Roller can come in handy. Personally, I would think I would much rather prefer just running our own Stadium card to counter the opponent's Stadium card. But again, there are certain situations like the one I just mentioned where running the Paint Roller would be a better option. And also certain decks don't really have any good Stadium cards to pair off with the Pokemon, so Paint Roller can be there just to even out the game play field and just getting rid of the opponent's Stadium card. So Paint Roller is there for us. Again, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it, but we'll see once the new set ultimately comes out. Now, getting on to the next card, a card that I'm actually very happy we got a reprint of, the Level Ball. Just an exceptionally useful card. I'm very happy again, once again, that we've gotten it. It allows us to search our deck for a Pokemon with 90 HP or less, then we reveal it and put it into our hand. So it's essentially an Ultra Ball, but for Pokemon with 90 HP or less, and there's no card discards required. This is, of course, going to work well with all of the evolutions that we just saw with this new set. It's also going to work quite well with the Vespiquen, which has exactly 90 HP. So Level Ball, definitely a card that I'm looking forward to. Yeah, so Level Ball is just a very cool card. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more creative decks coming about, just because Level Ball really does help those decks get going much more efficiently. Now, moving on to the next card, guys, we have the Lucky Helmet, a pretty cool card. Now, this card, we're of course we have to, of course, attach it to a Pokemon that doesn't have a Pokemon Tool card, and whenever the Pokemon that this card is attached to is damaged by an opponent's attack, we're able to draw 2 cards. So that is very cool. I don't know what Pokemon it would really go well with, but there's definitely a lot of potential to Lucky Helmet, especially if we latch it on to an incredibly bulky Pokemon such as the Wailord EX, for example, and that can really help kickstart a lot of our strategies. So Lucky Helmet is there for us. Again, I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I feel like I'd have to test it out in a lot of our decks, but I feel like to a certain extent, it can actually end up being a liability. I mean, let's face it, if we're running a deck that has a lot of draw supporter Pokemon such as Shaman EXs, for example, Lucky Helmet may ultimately be our doom card, forcing us to deck out. So again, not really sure how I feel about Lucky Helmet, but we'll see what players ultimately come up with. Next, we have all of the Spirit Links. Don't really think I need to individually discuss them. This is the Sceptile Spirit Link. Then we have the Mega Ampharos Spirit Link, of course. Each of these, when attached to their respective EX Pokemon, and then that Pokemon evolves into the Mega EX Pokemon, we don't end up losing our turn. So very useful. It's really what makes these Mega EX Pokemon viable. Then our very last Spirit Link is, of course, the Tyranitar Spirit Link, allowing us to evolve that Tyranitar EX into that Mega Tyranitar EX. Now we have a very cool supporter card, the Ace Trainer Supporter card. I feel like this is going to somewhat be a replacement for N, but it is a little bit unique and different from the N. Now we can only play this card if we have more prize cards left in our opponent, so I definitely don't think most decks will be running 4 copies of this. I mean, that would be a little bit foolish. I think personally I would probably stick to 2 copies of Ace Trainer in any given deck. But anyways, what it does is that if we have more prize cards than the opponent, we are able to play this card. Both players shuffle their hands into their deck, then we're able to draw onto 6 cards and our opponent is able to draw onto 3 cards. So it can be nice for disrupting hand strategies. Lowering the opponent's hand to a mere 3 cards is definitely going to pay off for a lot of times. But again, there is that restriction that we have to have more prize cards left in the opponent, which is very unfortunate because usually N has traditionally been helpful if we are the ones losing the game and the opponent has a dramatic advantage against us, whereas the Ace Trainer, we have to be winning the game to really be able to make use of it. So just a bit of an interesting difference with respects to the Ace Trainer card and the N, but I definitely do think we are going to be seeing a lot of competitive decks typically run 1 to 2 copies of this card in their decks. Now the next card is another supporter card. It is the Hex Mania. It's almost like a Garbodor. So what it does is that until the end of your opponent's turn, each Pokemon in play in each player's hand and in each player's discard pile has absolutely no abilities. I think this is mainly to be used as a card to counter that Vileplume. Again, the Vileplume that we saw way back in my other video where I had been discussing it, because it does ultimately shut down both our ability and the opponent's ability to make use of any item cards. So Hexmania, I think it's not going to be all that great of a card, just because, I mean, it is ultimately our supporter for the turn. I would much rather be using some sort of draw supporter, things like that, but I never know. I mean, I could be wrong. There could definitely be some benefits of at least running a single copy of that in any given deck. I mean, there are a lot of Pokemon special abilities that can be extremely disruptive, and shutting them down could ultimately help us out a lot. Again, I don't think it is worth giving up an entire turn, an entire supporter for the turn, and using this card instead. But again, I'm not entirely sure, so we'll see how that plays out. Now we get to the stadium cards. So we have 2 unique stadium cards. One of them is the Color Drained City. So what it does is that once again, this card will target Mega Evolution Pokemon. As if Giratina EX wasn't really enough, we have the Color Drained City. So between turns, we place 2 damage counters on each Mega Evolved Pokemon in play. Now this can actually benefit the Mega Tyranitar EX if our opponent's active Pokemon happens to be a Mega Evolution Pokemon as well, because then of course that ultimately allows that Mega Tyranitar EX to hit for a whole lot more damage. But aside from that, it's usually detrimental to the vast majority of Mega Evolution Pokemon. Our next Stadium card is one that I feel really gives Grass-type Pokemon a unique edge that we've never really seen before. So what it does is that it allows each player's Grass-type Pokemon to be evolved, during the very first turn that they were put into play. So that is very impressive. I mean, we can bring out a Mega Sceptile EX during turn 1, we can bring out Mega Heracross EX during turn 1, we can bring out Sceptiles, just a whole lot of Grass Evolution Pokemon. So I feel like Grass Pokemon are going to get a tremendous amount of support with the new set. And simultaneously, of course, that will probably increase the popularity of Fire-type decks because they will be used to counter these Grass-type decks. So Giant Plant Forest, very, very unique and cool stadium card, giving those grass Pokemon just a tremendous edge, I would say. So we're definitely going to be seeing a lot more grass-type Pokemon in the near future. We also have 2 special energy cards that came with the set. One of them is the Flash Energy card. It can only be attached to a Lightning-type Pokemon. If this card is attached to any other Pokemon than a Lightning Pokemon, we have to discard it. Of course, it provides a Lightning Energy card, but what's unique about this card is that the Lightning Pokemon that this card is attached to has absolutely no weakness. Now, you guys actually saw the little Jolteon that we had in the set as well. So what that could mean is that if we essentially pair up this Lightning Energy card onto one of our non-Lightning Pokemon, which happens to be a Stage 1 Pokemon, but we also have a Jolteon and played in the Flash Energy, can provide them with the ability of not having any sorts of weaknesses as well. So Flash Energy can be kind of cool, especially useful with Pokemon such as the Mega Manectric EX, which traditionally have a very, very difficult time dealing with those fighting type Pokemon. So Flash Energy is quite cool. I definitely think we're going to be seeing a lot of Lightning decks taking advantage of this special energy card. Then we also have the Bad Energy card. which acts as a makeshift sort of what do you call it? The Rocky Helmet. So this card can only be attached to a Darkness type Pokemon. Of course, whenever this the card that this Pokemon is attached, whenever the Pokemon that this card is attached to happens to be our active Pokemon and is damaged by an opponent EX attack, so we do have to be mindful of the fact that it's only our opponent's Pokemon EX's attack. We put 2 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. Of course, this is a card that's going to work extremely well with the Mega Tyranitar EX that I had discussed just a little while ago. Now, the remainder of our cards are pretty much full art versions for the most part. So here we see the Sceptile EX in a full art version. Pretty cool looking card. I think the artwork could have been a little bit better, but I definitely am liking it. Seems like he's just coming down from the sky and he's ready to attack you. Then we see the Mega Sceptile EX. Always do love the Mega Evolution full art versions of the cards, so definitely think that is quite cool. Jagged Saber, yeah, Jagged Saber is definitely a very impressive attack as well, so I will definitely be stocking up on these cards. Then we see the Kyurem EX. Again, I think it's a pretty downright awful EX Pokemon for the most part. I don't think we're going to be seeing a whole lot of players make use of it. Then we have that Ampharos EX. I think it's quite cool. Definitely a scrawny little neck over here though, so hopefully it doesn't lose its life too easily. But anyways, that is the Ampharos EX full art version. Then we have the Mega Ampharos EX, an absolutely beautiful card, I would say. I mean, its hair is just flowing in the wind, kind of cool. Exavolt. I felt like Excavolt would have been a bit of a cooler attack name, but anyways, Exavolt works as well, and I definitely can see this Pokemon as being quite powerful as well. Then we have the Hoopa EX, definitely a badass looking Pokemon, has his arms folded and then 2 other arms pointing at you, so that's kind of cool. Again, its ability is very, very cool. Definitely do think that it is quite a hyped card, and a lot of players are going to try and stock on them immediately once the new set gets released. Then we have the Machamp EX, pretty cool as well. I felt like the artwork could have been a little bit better, but I'm not really complaining. Again, I do think this is a very cool card, and I definitely think the Pokemon trading card game staff did a fantastic job at least making it a viable Pokemon. I hate getting new EX Pokemon and then we realize that they're absolutely useless, so I am quite happy that the Machamp EX can actually be a pretty feasible Pokemon for the most part. Then we have the Tyranitar EX. Again, very, very weak Pokemon, but its artwork definitely does look cool. Looks like it has a bit of a bloody background, just came back from some sort of massacre. Again, anyways, just a very cool card. And we have the Mega Tyranitar EX, has both of his arms out, and he's essentially saying, "Get at me, bro." I'm thinking that's what he's saying, and I would definitely not want to get in his face. I mean, a bulky 240 HP, and also a very solid attack, so definitely am looking forward to using him in a future battle. Then we have, of course, that Giratina EX. Again, just another full art version of it. Looks pretty cool. I feel like it would have been a little bit better though if it was more so staring at us. Seems like it's kind of vying its attention away from us. But anyways, again, just another very beautiful looking card. And of course, the very last full art card that we have is that Lugia EX. Again, I think it's definitely a very cool looking Pokemon. Looks quite menacing as well, is taking off for flight. Now let's discuss the remainder of the cards, which happen to be reprints of the Mega EX Pokemon that we had in our previous sets. So first of all, we have the Primal Kyogre EX. It has the Theta Max ability. So this is when one of your Pokemon becomes this Pokemon, heal all damage from it. So this is essentially what I meant by the synergy of these cards with the with the Porygon Z, that allows us to return any evolution Pokemon back into our hand, because then we can ultimately lay them back down, and then that will completely heal off a badly damaged Kyogre EX. It has the exact same attack as the other Primal Kyogre EX. Personally, I feel like the other Primal Kyogre EX has a better ability, allowing us to attach 2 energy cards onto it as opposed to the Theta Max ability. That's personally my take on it. I actually feel that way with the Primal Groudon EX as well. Primal Groudon EX, the only reason it was so deadly is because it had an ability that prevented it from being the target of any item cards, of any supporter cards and things like that. So unfortunately, I feel like this Primal Groudon EX is a bit of an injustice to the other Primal Groudon EX. I don't really see why a lot of players would be using this one as opposed to the other one. Again, it does have the Theta Max ability, which could potentially be used in combination with the Porygon Z that I had mentioned earlier. but again, this is by no means, this is definitely the worst of the two Primal Groudon EXs that we have currently in the game. I definitely do think that the artwork is quite nice though. I am loving the little gold border around these Pokemon. I definitely do think that they look completely fantastic. And the very last Pokemon that we have is going to be the Mega Rayquaza EX. Again, the Emerald Break ability. Again, I feel like the other Mega Rayquaza EX that we already have that is able to evolve right away has a better ability as opposed to the Theta Max ability that this Mega Rayquaza EX has. I mean, usually Mega Rayquaza EX gets set up so incredibly fast that we don't even have any damage counters stacked against those Rayquaza EXs. So again, I'm not really feeling these cards, but I definitely do think that the artwork looks absolutely gorgeous. I mean, those gold borders definitely are cards that I will absolutely be stocking up on. Now, the very last two cards that we have are essentially reprints, but they are going to be secret rare versions or super rare, depending on what you guys prefer to call them. So one of them is going to be the Energy Retrieval, not a card that we really see a whole lot of. I mean, there's only a few decks that really make use of the Energy Retrieval card, so I felt like they could have given a secret rare to a better card. But anyways, it is there for us, and as a collector, I definitely will be getting this card in the Pokemon TCG Online. And the very last card that we have, guys, is the Trainer's Mail. Again, it has the awesome little secret rare version of it. I would have preferred to see Level Ball getting a gold print, for example. I felt like that would have done a lot of justice to Level Ball just because it's such a powerful and unique type of card. Trainer's Mail, again, I felt like it would have been an exceptional card if the Lysander's Trump card remained at play, but unfortunately Lysander's Trump card is no longer a part of the game, and going through our deck too quickly can often be detrimental. I definitely still see some decks such as Night March decks and Vespiquen decks possibly taking advantage of that Trainer's Mail, so we definitely will be seeing it in action. But again, it's just a very pretty card. I will be getting 4 copies of these as well in the Pokemon TCG Online. Yeah, so that is pretty much my entire set review, guys. I really hope you guys found this helpful. I'll absolutely be taking a look at a lot of these unique types of decks in the near future, so definitely do look out for those. And again, if you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. If you guys have not seen part 1 of the set review, be sure to do so. I'll be providing the link to the first video in the description section down below. And I think that's going to be it, guys. So thank you guys very much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, or just by clicking that awesome little Pikachu in the bottom right corner. And I will see you guys next time.